Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. For those of you who don't know, my name is Rich, and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, and we cover motorsport in the form of race reviews, race previews, throwbacks on this day, and all the breaking news that we can squeeze in, whether it be from F1, Indycar, NASCAR, bikes, touring cars. We try and cover it all as best we can on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So do give us a search on all of those platforms, and you'll find us, and come and give us a follow. In case you sorry, I've just seen a comment. In case you didn't notice, we also do live interviews such as this. We've had some terrific guests on from across the motorsport spectrum, mainly from the world of touring cars, from the world of motorbikes, F1, IndyCar. From the world of touring cars, mainly on the British touring car side, we've spoken to the likes of Tom Chilton, the likes of Jake Hill, Ollie Jackson, Rick Parfitt, Jade Edwards, and also legends such as Rob Gravitt, Matt Neal, John Cleland, Steve Soper, Andy Prio, Rickard Rydell, Anthony Reid, and the like. We spoke with Dick Bennett, the boss of West Surrey Racing, who is credited with launching the careers of Ayrton Senna, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello, and the like. And as I mentioned, we've spoken to many drivers who have crossed from F1, IndyCar, sports cars, the likes of Mr. Terry Fullerton, Ayrton Senna's great rival from karting. We've also spoken with Derek Warwick, Stefan Johansson, David Bradham, Alex Caffey, Perry McCarthy, Mark Blundell, Karen Chandhok, Mika Salo, Eddie Cheever, Ari Lyondike, Danny Sullivan, Willie T. Ribbs, Jaya Hildebrand, Will Power, Alex Palou, Jackie Ix, which was fabulous, and the legend, of course, that is Mr. Mario Andretti, who is very rightly a legend of F1 and IndyCar. So they are all saved on our Facebook page under the video section, and on YouTube and on Twitter. So do go and check those out, and there's plenty more besides. However, don't do it just yet, because we have another fantastic guest joining us, someone I am very, very, very excited to speak with. I mentioned Mario was a legend of F1 and IndyCar, and IndyCar legends don't come much bigger than our guest this evening, an absolute legend, royalty in the North American broadcasting scene, the voice of the Indy 500, with some incredible tales to tell. So I am going to stop my rambling. I've just seen that there's an issue with the sound. We are going to sort that. I'm going to stop rambling and bring in our guest this evening, an absolute legend. I'm very, very excited to speak with him. So please join me in welcoming the legend that is Mr. Paul Page.
How you doing, Rich? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Paul. How are you?
I'm excellent. Sitting in Southwest Florida and enjoying the weather.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. It's a bit cold here in the south of the UK, so I'm not jealous at all.
Don't tell me.
No, lovely. I've just seen a few comments just before we do start. I mentioned it there. We've got a few sound issues. I am going to play with the sound just as we go, but I'm sure we'll be absolutely fine. It's just a little bit fuzzy. So, but we'll sort it, folks. Don't worry. Just want to turn my attention very quickly to the comments. Hello, guys. Thank you for tuning in already. Thank you to everyone who is tuning in. If you have any questions for Paul, then we will certainly do our best to work them in. Yeah, just sit back and enjoy. So, Paul, thank you very, very much for sparing your afternoon, I suppose it is, there to come and have a chat with us. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
It is for me, too. I really appreciate it.
It's, yeah, as I said, I'm very, very excited for this because, you're known as the voice of the Indy 500, and I've tuned into every single one since I was 7 back in 1988. Obviously, you've been doing it far longer and you've far more experienced with the 500. But
yeah, my first time to go to the Indy 500 was in 1960. I was just a boy, but then I started covering it for a local news outlet in 1972. So I've been around there quite some time.
Wow, I mean, it's not a bad place to be around, is it?
No, it's the best there is.
It's fantastic. Again, I've just seen some more people saying that the sound isn't very good. I think it may be an issue at my end. Paul did say that right at the start, so I'm just going to press a couple of buttons here. I'm going to play with the sound and see if we can sort it out for you guys. Sure. Do apologise if anything changes here. To there. Let's see if that helps. I've just changed something, so hopefully, guys, that'll be a bit better. Do let us know. But yes, what I like to do is start right at the start. Obviously, I've done. Oh, hang on. Let's see. It's your end, I'm afraid. Rich, pause is fine. Okay, we will. I will keep playing with it, folks. Apologies. But no, what we'd like to do is start right at the start. And yeah, how did you first become interested in like motorsport? Because you weren't, as I'm aware, you weren't born into a motorsport family, were you?
No, not really. My first taste of motorsport was actually, I was a military brat. My family was U.S. Army. And so we were stationed for a while in Stuttgart. And so my first exposure was really Formula One. But I was, I was like 7 years old, so I didn't really know what I was looking at. But then when I came back to the States, and I didn't want to do anything, I had football and other things that I was interested in, American football. And then my family said, look, your great uncle, who's a big part of my upbringing, lives down in Indianapolis, and he'd like you to come down and see the Indianapolis 500. I was 15. And I said, no, I've seen Formula One. Indianapolis, they make 800 left turns. What can that be about? So they insisted, and I went. And the race hadn't even started yet, and I was completely in love with it. Absolutely and completely in love with it, just from the traditional ceremonies for the hour before the race. And of course, when the race started, I was completely blown away. And then the finish was one of the greatest finishes of the race ever, with the two, we were in the roadster car days. So you could see the driver up working at the wheel back and forth. But in the last laps, Jim Rathman and Roger Ward exchanged the lead on almost every corner. Of course, you only score at that time, especially at the start finish line. So all of these didn't necessarily get recorded, but boy, was that a day.
Wow. Well, what
the rest then, as they say, is history, huh?
Well, yeah, I guess it all went from there. But wow, what a superb, first exposure to it, And I'm the same. First time I heard about the 500, I thought, really, just turning left, really? And then I saw it, and it was just, wow! It just had everything, as you say. Just from the, I said it was 1988. It was from the releasing of the balloons back home again in Indiana. The band and.
Yeah.
It just had everything, and I've loved it ever since. So definitely on that page with you. When did you first sort of become interested in the media side, and when did you first think about going racing? Because obviously you were a racer as well.
Well, as I was in high school, and just getting ready to graduate from high school, they had a program with the local radio station, the high school did, where you could go up and be an announcer. So, it was something to do. It got me out of classes. So I went and did it. And I just loved what it was all about. Everything about it was so much fun. So I thought maybe I'd make a career in broadcasting in some form. I didn't know what form it would be, but probably more as what at that time were called disc jockeys. One thing led to another, and I went in the military, came out, moved to Indianapolis, and once I got there, it's radio in Indianapolis all the way. I started out as a disc jockey, but about a year into living down there, I got a job at a local station, WIBC, which, by the way, I highly recommend for when you're listening to the race, if you're in the city. Great station. And I was there, and so was my predecessor and mentor, Sid Collins. And one thing led to another, and I started covering racing, and I loved it. So I thought, well, why don't you get involved in it? And so I bought a Lotus 51 Formula Ford, but it was a left-hand drive. So with the gear shift and everything. So I got in it the first time, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And then I realized that I had to get a better car with a better transmission with a Hewland. The Lotus had a Renault gearbox. So one thing led to another, and I spent 7 years racing Formula Ford, which I enjoyed thoroughly.
Wow. It seems that's the also the proving ground for drivers. You know, from like wherever they're from in the world, it's the one that they accessed. You know, those that started in karting, they accessed it relatively easily at the time. And you know, there's so many great names have come through Formula Ford, isn't there?
It is. The thing I like about it, and I think most drivers who pass through it, and because it's a universal formula, only I raced before they were allowed any aerodynamics. In fact, the big thing when I was racing was we have to come off of the stock Department of Transportation tires. We could now use racing tires. So that was a major accomplishment. But the cars were so equal, and they had no energy whatsoever. So you had to do everything you could to preserve your energy in the corner. Don't turn the wheel too much, whatever. And so that way it became an excellent proving ground because you had to learn how to make the car work because you didn't have the power otherwise. So I think I learned a few things, but then when I got the job calling the Indianapolis 500, that was a year-round obligation on weekends. And so I retired from Formula Ford without so much as one win. I did have a second place, but I never won.
Podium's a podium. We'll take a podium.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's one more podium than I've ever got or ever will get. So, but no. As I said, I mean, most of the research that I've done is revolved around some old photos that I've seen of you. I'd just like to run through some that I found from your racing days.
Sure.
I think it was 75, 76. It's a photo actually of your Eldon Mark X Formula Ford car, and the cars don't seem to have changed as the base. You know, there's a few little bits of change, but from there through to like the 80s, they didn't seem to change at all. Were they fun to drive because they look fun?
They were a great deal of fun, and that Mark was built in the UK, and so was the engine. It was a Piper engine on board, but it was a short wheelbase car. It was a little shorter than the Lola at the time. The Lola was winning everything, in part because I'm sure there was this gigantic cheat going on where the Lola had stress-bearing panels, and you couldn't have that. That's supposed to be strictly a space frame car, but you were creating kind of a monocoque out of it. And so one time we protested all the Lolas, and the scrutineer thought and then came back and said, well, the rivets are like 2 inches apart. If they were any closer together, then they will be illegal. But since they're 2 inches apart, they're not. So we had all the same kind of controversy that IndyCar and Formula One and everything has today.
Just with people getting an advantage or trying to, or is it legal? Is it not?
Of course, you're always trying.
It never stops.
Yeah, I really had arguments on occasion because my reading of the rules at that time was when the yellow comes out, you can't pass. My argument being then, well, you can be alongside, just don't pass them. So you were there ready to go. That didn't work very well.
Just that far behind. Just terrific. I saw another photo from you. Someone just said the sound's all good now, so that's fine.
It is.
Thank
nice.
you, Oliver Taylor, for tuning in. Just want to say very quickly, Paul is actually recording the IndyCar from Barber Motorsport. So if anyone knows the result, don't put it in the comments because you'll see it.
Don't put them up. Don't put them up.
No spoilers. So I just want to move on to another photo I saw. It was you in the 24-hour Escort showroom stock race in '84. And you were alongside like Lynn St. James and like Caitlyn Jenner, obviously Bruce Jenner back then.
Right.
Just what are your memories of that outing, and did you enjoy the endurance side?
I loved it. I I learned so much driving. We were driving Ford SVOs, and I learned a great deal because I'd never in the Formula Ford driven at night. and now I'm working more in television, and I was working with Caitlin at the time, and she was doing a lot of broadcasts with us, and so as a partner, and we also had a second car that had like Bob Bondurant and I forget Kenny Rogers.
Oh wow.
Kenny Roberts. Sorry,
Yeah, Kenny Roberts. Yeah.
Was the other driver on our second car. But never having driven in the dark, I had to learn all these things like, turn your mirror a little different. Don't get the lights so that they bother you when the guy comes up behind. And we were at Mid-Ohio, which is a beautiful race course.
Is that the one they use for the IndyCar these days? Is it the same location?
Yeah, same one, same configuration. And to my way of thinking, one of the most difficult tracks there is to race in the United States. But I was on my second stint. It was early in the morning. It was still quite dark out, and so there was a light fog set in because there's a lake just behind the track. And so when you went down into the turns closest to that lake, you'd be passing through just not a lot of fog, but some fog. And of course, we all had our cars marked with different side lights and everything, so we knew who one another was, and so the scorers did. And I was following 3 other cars, and I got the impression that we all looked like starships going through the void down there. It was just, like, oh, this is cool. I also got instructed by Bob Bondurant in driving. He was behind me at one point in the race in the dark, and he had mentioned to me during my break. He said, "You need to get turn 1 down a little better," and he talked me through it and everything. So we went out together, and the next lap, he decided to help me learn turn 1. He just came up on my bumper and just pushed me all the way through. That's the way to learn.
Bump draft. Yeah. The NASCAR bump draft.
Yep.
Fantastic. Wow. Just if you were obviously, we said you were with Caitlin Jenner and with Lynn St. James. Just a couple of words on those two, because obviously Lynn St. James, bit of a trailblazer, Rookie of the Year in 1992, my favourite Indy 500. I'm ashamed to admit, because of all the crashes when I was 11, you like a pile up, and I'm ashamed to admit that. She was amazing getting that Rookie of the Year in 1992, and a very good driver.
She's really an excellent driver, and excuse me, by the way, not a bad broadcaster. She worked with us in the booth for a number of times, and she's a great person, and she has the passion. Even to this day, I mean, all the time she's been around and just got herself involved with the Women in Racing projects that's going on in the States now. But yeah, she had the passion, and she was fun, and she also plays classical piano, so she has she's got some depth.
Yeah, this is always nice to see. No, lovely. Also, the other person there is what was that then? Bruce Jenner, now Caitlin Jenner. She's back in motorsport with the W Series team. She's got her own team, the W Series, which still divides opinion. The W Series, is it working? What's the aim of it? Is it divisive? Is it inclusive? Yeah. But I'm all for it. And I think someone like Caitlin Jenner coming on board is going to put it more on the spotlight, which can only be a good thing in my book.
Yeah, I think so. I don't get to see that many of those, and I'm not sure why. It's probably my issue of not putting the recorder on at the right time. But what that points to, in my view, is that Jenner has always loved racing, even when he ran and got the gold as a decathlete. And he did it she did it with us at NBC. For a while, did IndyCars, did NASCAR with us. So, and then I would run in. They were on the Jenner was on the floor above my broadcast booth when I was working television, and I'd go up during a break or something, and we'd just talk over what was going on. And he just again, it's a passion issue, and I think that's what it is with most of us.
Yeah, I guess if you love something and you fall into it, you kind of get stuck in it. I have an argument that if you go to the Indianapolis 500, which needs to be on everybody's list, I sincerely believe that if you go, 9 out of 10 people will come out of there saying, "I've got to go back," even if they only intended it to be a one-time thing. Yeah, Absolutely. And I know that's going to be the case with me, and it's going to be very expensive if I do that. So I'm going to make the most of it when I'm there in 4 weeks' time. But no, yeah, it's one of those events. You know, if you've got a passion for motorsport, as you say, it should be on the bucket list. It's called now, isn't it?
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's definitely very much on mine. Another photo I saw is fast forwarding. It was from 1997 with the with your like Legends car, which I think are fantastic little cars. You know, terrific bits of racing. And I just read something about it. You were racing against your broadcasting colleague, Jack.
Jackaroo. Yeah.
Jack Arute. That must have been fun.
Yeah. At the time, he and his family owned a racetrack up in New England. And he said, "Come on, I want to race against you in the Legends cars." And as you say, everybody thought the Legends were so much fun. And so off we go, and we're racing, and full house crowd, a lot of cars and everything. But we just get started, and he just rams into me. And I kind of look over, "What are you doing?" Then he does it again, and now he's hitting me from the other side. His idea was he wanted to make a real show out of it, and so. We traded paint back and forth and just had a great time. And at the end, I pulled up to a stop, and he came roaring behind me and hit me so hard he climbed up on my car a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it was fine. He got hurt, and it's hard to get hurt in those, I think. But yeah, that was a carnival evening for me.
Just a fun evening out. I also read, was it Jack's father was presenting the trophies, and he wanted to get first. He obviously wanted to get there quite badly. He didn't want his dad giving the trophy to you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and his dad was kind of the patriarch of that whole family created racetrack.
Wow. That's fantastic. I love it. I love that. Because obviously, Jack was part of the broadcasting team that was the voices of the Indy 500 for me growing up, but we'll come to that shortly. One more was now this comes up pretty much every guy from across, a guy or girl from across the states that I've spoken to who's had a long career involved in motorsport. They all mentioned the Jim Russell Racing School. I mean, it's a superb establishment, and I saw a couple of pictures of you there. How often were you there, and what did you think?
I attended the regular school 3 times and the advanced school once at Laguna Seca, California. And one of those times I took Tony George from the Speedway. He was young, and it was first time in a race car. And he got mad at me because he claimed they set a limit on the number of revs you're going to use, but it's just a line on your RPMs. It's not a device in the car. And so I pulled up and passed him. And when we got out, he was so upset with me. "You went above the limit and all that." Yeah, a little.
It never happened.
Great place to pass, though. Wonderful place.
You got to push. Yeah, you got to push the rules a bit sometimes, haven't you?
Well, you do. That's racing.
I'm going to come off the broadcasting side, but I just saw something that I do want to mention on today of all days. There was obviously 28 years ago we lost Ayrton Senna. This is an Ayrton Senna t-shirt. You can probably see the colour, and that's Ayrton up behind me. He's a hero of mine. Someone actually asked the question, what would Ayrton Senna have meant to IndyCar? Would you have loved to have seen him over in IndyCar?
Oh, goes without saying. Absolutely.
That did feel like a silly question when it was coming out, to be honest.
And I went to that test that he had in IndyCar out at Phoenix.
And Penske, was it?
Yes, right. And that was at the time. It's kind of an oval. It's got like an extra turn. It's really just a jog in the middle of the backstretch. But he was running on record time almost immediately, and it's kind of like when Nigel Mansell came and ran at Phoenix first time. They just are so good. And Ayrton, and with his name recognition and what he was doing in Formula One at the time, the idea of him coming and, if nothing else, racing the Indy 500, that would have been spectacular. I would have loved every minute of it. Yeah,
absolutely agree. Because there were a few mutterings when he joined Williams for '94 that there was an offer from an IndyCar team on the table, but he wanted to go and race the the Williams car that had been so dominant in '93 with Alan Prost.
Mhm.
And now in hindsight, you think, oh, you just wish
Yeah.
he'd
If
gone
only.
the other way and maybe he'd still be
It,
with us. But yeah,
it's kind of interesting to me that Indy attracts a lot of Formula One and other highly accomplished drivers, but especially in Formula One. And the first contact I had was with Jim Clark when he came over, and they all seem to really enjoy the experience. They enjoy the camaraderie of the IndyCar paddock because there's not the tension that you'll find in a Formula One paddock. But that all of them, I think all of those people that have done that, Mario probably being the most notable in that he won Indianapolis, he was Formula One world champion, and he won a Daytona 500.
yeah.
And I think a lot of them think at least the world championship and an Indy 500 win are two parts of the portfolio that you really must have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a bit of conjecture about the other one. Where is it? The Monaco Grand Prix? Is it what? Yeah, the Triple Crown that keeps getting banded around. But
Yeah.
only Graham Hill knows that for sure. But I want to touch on some of the guys that you've spoken with very shortly. But just want to go back to your broadcasting career. Obviously, you're working in Indianapolis for the radio. You've got and you've got the the gig, I suppose, calling calling the 500. I can't get away with saying gig. I'm not cool enough. I can't. Can't. But just even, I mean, obviously you went into broadcasting and you sort of touched on it earlier. But was it just a case of, did you always want to get into the motorsport commentary side of things, or was it just something that kind of happened to you?
I thought when I started working in Indianapolis, I thought that it would be interesting, but my sight was set on playing records, playing music. But then when I started seeing opportunities to do this or that in a small version at some racetrack, then I thought, this might be good. And then when I get to WIBC and Sid Collins is there, the story is soapbox racing. Well, they have a beautiful soapbox racing track in Indianapolis called Wilbur Shaw Hill. And I was sent as a junior reporter out to interview the winner of that particular race that year. And I did. It was a gal. She was super. And I then sent the material by radio back to the radio station and drove back to the station. I walked in the door pretty excited about having interviewed somebody in that realm that was going to actually get some notoriety. And there stood Sid Collins, my predecessor and mentor, with his arms crossed and a look. And I thought, oh, what's up? And he says,
like the angry head teacher.
well, he said to me, that is the worst interview I have ever heard. I'm ready. I'm going to pass out. I mean, it's over. But then he took me back in one of the studios, a large studio, and taught me how to interview. It was several hours. And then we got liking each other and hanging out, and he would mentor me. He would say, hey, how would you cover this? How would and then he finally put me on the radio network in 1974 as a pit reporter. And then by 1977, he had passed away, and I was there to take over his position. And that was a huge moment in my world.
I'm sure it was. I mean, yeah, this is something I don't want to dwell on too often because he'd been diagnosed with an illness, hadn't he?
Right.
76, 77.
Yeah.
I don't really like asking this, but it's an opportunity to do so. I had heard or I've read that he confided in you that he was planning on ending things on his terms.
Yes, he did. The story.
How did that make you feel at the time? Because obviously he was still your mentor, wasn't he? And it must have been very, very difficult.
The plan he and I had put together in the fall of 76 was that he would do the 77 race, which would have been an anniversary date for him. He'd start it, and then I would take it over and finish it. That was exciting for both of us.
Yeah.
But then he had this problem with walking. And his doctors kept saying that, it's something in your foot, it's a hammer toe or something. But what they weren't telling him was that he had ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
Right. Right.
So he finally went to a doctor out of town who gave him the absolute diagnosis. And what happened is what our doctors locally were worried about. He didn't have any family. He lived alone, never married. They were afraid that he'd probably get pretty morbid about it, and he did. And he started talking about suicide and even how he would do it. And that was probably in March of that year. And then I think what happened, his another good friend named Henry Bradshaw and I had gone to his apartment to pick him up because we were going to find a place, a care center that he could stay in. And when we got there, the door was ajar, and his cane was hanging on the banister of the stairs, and we found that he had hung himself.
Oh my goodness! I didn't realize you. Oh my goodness! Wow.
So it was not unexpected. In fact, the psychiatrist that was helping us out with this said, he's going to talk about it, and if he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He says if people want to actually commit suicide, they generally will get it done. And so if he says something about how he's going to do it, you just react to that in a more normal tone, not a "oh my God" kind of reaction. So if you say you're going to shoot yourself, oh, okay, but that's going to be a terrible mess, isn't it? That was the way we were supposed to handle that. And he came up with a number of different ways, and hanging was never one of them.
Wow.
And then for me, not only finding him, the next day was the first meeting of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway radio network, where we bring all the announcers together. So, overnight, suddenly I'm in charge of this, something totally unanticipated.
Wow. Not really sure what to say to that. It's
I will tell you this, which will perhaps make it a little better. During the autopsy, they found he probably had less than 30 days to live anyway.
Right. Okay.
There may be
some kind of edge off it.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate you talking about it. It's not the kind of thing I like to bring up.
Let me balance that with a good story about
Let's do that.
Unknown to the general public, Sid was parsimonious, to say the least. I never saw Sid pick up a check for anything. Dinner, everybody else paid. Sid never picked up a check. And it got to be a joke between him and I. It's like, when are you going to buy something? And one evening, I was visiting when he now was fairly sick and was bedridden. He said, do you want a drink? I said, well, sure. You don't drink, do you, Sid? No, he says, I don't drink, but what would you like? I said, I'd like a nice scotch. He said, well, if you go down into the dining room, there's a buffet there, and just pull out the center drawer and you can get your scotch. I don't understand that, but all right. So I went down, I pulled out the drawer, and there were literally 100 of the little airplane bottles.
Oh, yeah.
And I got a Glenlivet 12, and
I love a Glenlivet.
And he looked at me kind of sheepishly, and then he said, well, you see, I always travel first class, and in first class, you're entitled to 3 drinks. So I have them give me the bottle. So I have that drawer. That's how cheap Sid was. But we all knew it, and we all laughed with it, and it made him much more human.
Yeah, I guess he paid for the flights, perhaps. So in a way, he paid a bit. Maybe.
I don't think he ever bought the flight, but yeah.
It was a gift. It was a gift, at least. Yeah. Wow. No, that's lovely.
Pardon me with that. I'm a little bit dry today, so.
No problem. No, never a problem. Just to sort of rewind through your career again, bits and pieces that I've seen and things like that. You mentioned about Jim Clark. I saw a photo of you in '65 interviewing Jim Clark, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was 3 years before he passed. I think it was '68 he passed.
Yes, I think
he's seen by many as the greatest ever. Obviously, over in the UK, We're a bit biased. You know,
Sure.
but just sort of your, I mean, did you ever know him on a personal level? You know, Jim Clark, or was it just an interview you did, or just
I
what
would
are your memories of him?
I would think it would be presumptuous of me to make it a personal level. A professional level, yes, but as you know, when you're working, especially in racing, it does also become personal. So we talk a bit, and it was fun to watch him react to the different things in the speedway. And then one day, I think it was Goodyear. I forget who it was, but somebody, one of the big manufacturers or something, set up a driver's day at Indianapolis Raceway Park, which is a road course about 4 miles away from the Indianapolis Speedway.
Right.
And part of the thrill was Jimmy Clark was going to take people around on a ride in what essentially was a rental car. And so I'm pushing my way into that line. And they, I wasn't far enough up in the line. He took about 12 different people, and that was it. He had to go back to the track. But, you know, you get to see him, and he's talking to people, and he's a little shy. I'll say, especially during an interview, a little shy, but just a wonderfully pleasant human being.
No, that's lovely to hear. Obviously, he passed before I was around, and yeah, every story I've ever heard has been positive. Obviously, you know, Sir Jackie Stewart was a great friend, and he speaks very warmly. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, one of the best ever, certainly,
Yep.
certainly. You know, you don't win the Indy 500 and 2 F1 World Championships without being quite good, do you?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Just moving forward, like chronologically, I mentioned in the intro there that we spoke with Mario Andretti back in February last year, which was a real pleasure, a real honour. Such a nice guy. I just wanted to talk about him because obviously you would have spent quite a lot of time with Mario. First in 1969, his first and his only Indy 500 win. Bafflingly. What were your memories of that? Because obviously Mario was always popular, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, because he was so outgoing, and so Italian. You know, he talked with his hands, and he had wonderful things to say. And when he won Indianapolis, he understood the nature of being a champion of the Indianapolis 500. That is to say, he indulged people. He'd seek out opportunities to talk with his fans and his friends, and he'd explain things. And to this day, he's still doing that. I mean, he's totally the best ambassador of IndyCar that I know of. He's at every event. He's so friendly, and I just love the guy. So it's he wrote the introduction to my book.
Yes.
And
yes. Which I have. It's just over there.
I do. Good.
I got it,
the first sentence begins, "Paul Page is no rat." And the publisher said, "Oh, we can't put that in there." And he said, "No, what he's saying is that I keep the secrets. You can tell me something, and I won't deal with it," which he elaborates later on in the graph. But the first sentence being, "Paul Page is no rat." Mario's terrific. He's great.
That's a great intro. Fabulous. And he's still doing the passenger rides, isn't he, in IndyCar?
Yes, he is. Yep.
Yeah. And I've actually been in contact with his team, and I'm hoping to catch up with him on the Friday of the 500.
Patty will help.
If I do, my colleagues will be seeing a grown man cry. Rest assured. But he was wonderful, and he won the F1 World Championship, and obviously in very sad circumstances with what happened to Ronnie Peterson, and he was very open about that, which was very nice. But something I wanted to speak to you about was the Andretti luck or bad luck, or this myth that floats over the speedway every time an Andretti is involved. So obviously we've got Marco involved now, and I asked him about it. I said, "Look, do you buy it? It's like a curse or something?" He just said, "Oh, absolutely not." He doesn't. He just said, "You make your own luck, and sometimes it doesn't go your way." What were your thoughts on it?
Well, when you consider the different ways that they didn't win the 500, there were probably 3 500s that Michael should have won.
Well, 92 was the big one, wasn't it?
Exactly.
When he dominated it.
So, yeah, I think there's. I generally don't believe in something like luck, but in this case, you have to ask yourself, What's going on there? What have they done wrong? Who have they angered up in the clouds?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but a quick aside: the public address announcer at the Speedway at that time was a guy named Tom Carnegie. He was terrific. He had a great booming voice, and he was the best public address announcer I've ever heard. They offered me the opportunity to do the public address for the 500 after I essentially had retired with the 2016 race. And I said no, because it is so different than broadcasting. But Tom had the knack for it. And he said to me one day, he said, you know what to do when you're doing a PA and it gets really dull out there and nobody's passing? I said, no. He says, well, I just say, where's Mario? And the crowd comes to its feet immediately. He says, I have no idea where Mario is or what's going on. It's just a way to get the crowd to stand up.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic. Because it was him who did all the intros for the pre-race stuff, wasn't it? You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, he did the whole race. He was the chief announcer.
National anthem. It was him, wasn't it?
But yeah, and he's part of what made the pre-race. I mean, I'm not sure we do it today because I'm never in a position to listen to part of the pre-race because I'm working. But he would even announce the chief steward is now making his final inspection of the track. And here you're sitting up in the grandstands, and this little car would come out at the end of the pit area. You know, he made that into a ceremony of some sort when it was truly a necessity.
Just keeping people involved and engaged and everything.
He was so good at it. So good at it.
Wow. Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'd have loved to have, been part of that, but sadly not. Another one I want to move on to, again, not spend too long on because it was a very sad year. I just want to walk through some of the main Indy 500s and events-wise, but 1973, it's kind of on record as the worst Indy.
It was.
Again, I wasn't around, but from what I've read and seen, it was just awful. I saw a picture of you with, I forget who it was, Robin
Miller.
Yeah. And it was shortly after Art Pollard had been killed, and the look on both of your faces, it was just, drained almost. Obviously we've seen the footage of it, unfortunately, and I've heard that Art was a really sort of nice, sort of fun guy, quite quiet maybe, or
very quiet, but very friendly. Always had a smile, and the reason Rob and I were so devastated was we had been out a little bit earlier. I think before the track opened in the month of May, Robin had bought a Formula Ford, and he needed to test it. So we went out to Indianapolis Raceway Park, and Art, I think this was the year before, because Art had broken his leg and was on crutches, and so he came out to help, and he gave Robin a lot of good stuff. The funny moment of that was, though, is Robin went out and he took 2 laps. He said, I can't find the gears. Well, that Hewlin Mark V is a little tight, but he finally figured that out, and he took altogether about 10 laps, and then he came back and he said, it feels like it's losing power. So we took the cowling off, and there on a nice piece of tape are the words, no oil. He didn't have any oil in the car. Thank goodness, whatever had been in there before, it didn't damage. He may have had to put some main journal bearings in or something. But
wow, goodness me. Well, no, I think like no oil would do it, wouldn't it?
He just took delivery of it and borrowed my trailer to go get it, and he got it from Andy Granatelli. And we were going to test it, and he kind of thought of it as a passenger car, and just got in it and took off.
Wow. And obviously it didn't happen with the accident and everything. And obviously that was then compounded by the awful accident right at the very start of that year with
everything about it. The attempt to start it.
That must have been awful to witness.
Well, the first lap crash, I was actually standing at the pit exit. I didn't have a job in that year, um, and I'm right where on the first lap accident. Most of us journalists would go down either to this area, which there was a creek there at one time, and we'd stand just be ahead of the fence, but behind the creek. And that first lap accident where Salt Wathler is literally spinning like like some sort of Fourth of July. I mean, it was horrible. And Wally Dallenbach slid right up to where we were, and there were cars everywhere. And of course, that stopped the race.
No, that was when the fuel spread into the crowd as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Though, if there's some visual, some film that you can look at, and I can't tell you where to go find it, but it seems to show that the fuel, as it went through the fencing, did not ignite.
Yeah.
But it did spray, and of course,
Hot.
that fuel was very caustic, and so they had some of those burns. But it's amazing; it just looks like the fire didn't go through. I don't know that that's true or not. I just know that.
From what I've unfortunately seen, it does look like it's just the liquid going through, but it's not something I want to see more than once.
No. And then, of course, it took 3 days to run it.
Because of weather.
And Swede Savage, who was destined to be a truly great race driver, is involved in just a horrible accident where he's literally sitting in his seat only, and he's in the midst of a big fire.
Yeah.
And
because he got out, didn't he, of the fire? I believe. Did he get out of the fire? I think he got out, didn't he? And
but not necessarily under his own power completely.
Yes.
There were a couple of people that wandered in there and helped him, but he died a couple of weeks later. And it's just those are tough times.
And there was the incident in the pit lane where the team member Turan was hit by a vehicle, and I saw the driver of the vehicle, and he was in tears. Or what happened?
Well, there was something interesting in that there had never been any protocols for that emergency equipment. The protocol is essentially get to the scene as fast as you can, and that's what that truck was doing. It was heading up toward the north end of the pits to be helping with the big fire that was there.
It's going the wrong way, wasn't it? Essentially.
Yeah, and so Turan had no reason to expect to be hit. He was a signal guy and just stepped off onto the pit road, and so he got hit. And I was sitting in the pits at that time, right across from where that happened.
Oh, goodness.
Wow. It was that whole race. I mean, you've hit it. That's probably the worst race ever.
Yeah. And something I'm not going to dwell on any longer. But I mean, I guess, did you just want to get out of there once it was all done?
We wanted to get out of there before that.
Sure.
By the second day and attempts to, we were all saying, geez, this thing has to get done. Move on.
Was it Johnny Rutherford won it? Was it?
No, Gordon Johncock.
Gordon Johncock won it.
Yeah, it was a short
overlooked, obviously. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna draw a line under that. Thank you for talking about it. It's obviously it's such a big event in Indy history. I kind of had to bring it up.
Yeah. No, it's big.
Didn't really want to. Again, just chronologically, I've got from 74 to 76. You were a pit lane reporter, like a pit reporter.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that more than the broadcasting side, or was it just as good?
Absolutely not. The reason was when Sid hired me, the open position was the north pits, right just beyond pit entry. And one, it was good because those pits generally have the cars that are going to fall out of the race early on. So I had a chance to interview more people.
Right.
But on the other hand, we had no speed limit on the pits at that time. So it wasn't uncommon for somebody to be screaming into the pits like 160 miles an hour, because they're way down at the south end. And I didn't want to be there. I really didn't want to be there.
Sure. Wow. Crikey. I mean, obviously, pit lane limiting has been come in fairly recently, but I remember I was at the Formula One, the Grand Prix qualifying at Silverstone in 1988, and they put a kink in the pit lane, and they were still. I remember Ayrton Senna came past in McLaren. He was still screaming around there and shooting into the pits, and you think this is madness, The
One
thing
of my
that's limited.
favorite tracks, Silverstone. I really like Silverstone.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, I think they've kind of ruined it now. I mean, obviously they've made it longer on the infield and put.
Yeah.
I preferred
I
it the
just,
87,
what
88.
what I remember great about Silverstone, we were there to do a world championship motorcycle race, and was the paddock head marshal, I guess. It was Old Tom. Everybody referred to Old Tom, and if you knew Old Tom and you talked it up with him, which of course we did, then you might get a little better position on the parking, something like that. But
I see.
that and Woodcut, and that's where I first met Murray Walker,
Oh,
was at that track. And there's an announcer. He was amazing. He taught me how to do the charts that I eventually used for all of racing. I had my own system, but it wasn't nearly as efficient as his. And since we're on the topic of Murray, he came to watch an IndyCar race at Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Formula One was in Montreal, so it wasn't a very big hop. And I invited him up to the booth, and we chatted a bit during the commercial and everything. And I said, well, put a headset on, and we'll get you in here. And so we did, and I finally got a chance. I sat in the booth, Murray Walker, the great voice of the Formula One. And Murray, what do you think of the Indy cars here? And he said, and it shocked me, he said, Paul, I believe in the past 5 minutes, I've seen more passes on a track than an entire Formula One season. How can you say that? But he's a pretty straightforward guy, too.
Oh, wow. And he's obviously passed away recently and greatly missed. I felt like
good autobiography though of his.
Yes, again, I haven't read it yet, but I got it for Christmas. It's over in the bookcase, but
you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely one I want to. I mean, and I think a lot of people would agree that's one broadcast we'd love to hear: Paul Page and Murray Walker in the same booth.
That'd be fun. That would have been more fun.
Wow, that would have been.
It was a treat.
Fabulous. Well, I mean, we've been, a few comments have come in already, and we've all been saying that, you're the Murray Walker of North America, the IndyCar Murray Walker. So, yeah,
I appreciate that. That's kind, but I'm not near Murray. I can do Murrayisms though. I've been known to do a Murrayism occasionally.
Oh, we love a Murrayism. Who doesn't love a Murrayism? He just got so excited, didn't he?
Yeah, and the penultimate lap was a mark for him. I thought he's the only guy I ever said who's calling the lap before the final lap and making a big thing out of it, and got away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but one of my favourites was it his car is completely unique apart from the one behind, which is identical.
Yes.
Fabulous. Yeah, what a great guy. I felt like I'd lost a grandfather when he passed. Honestly, it was that.
We all lost a great deal when he passed.
Yeah, absolutely. Just moving on. Again, 1977, you had a helicopter accident. That must have given you a shake. I mean, what? Because was it you were doing? Obviously
we were doing news and traffic reporting from the helicopter.
Right.
It wasn't really meant to be serious. I was the straight man for the guy who was on the air in the morning and in the afternoon. And we were returning home. We were going for the Indianapolis airport, and we were just passing over the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and just north of it. And we heard this really loud crack. And I looked at the pilot and we were like, I don't know what that is. And we flew a little bit further and heard a second series of cracks, and the helicopter started down. And all I could think of was the Speedway High School looked like where we were going to end up. We had no auto rotation at all because the pinion gear at the base of the main rotor shaft had fractured, stopped the rotors in flight. So we essentially fell solidly from 500 feet. And I wanted to retire at like 4 feet or something, but I couldn't get away with that. I ended up with very severe injuries to my left leg and foot. But now it's just a good story.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, again, not going to...
I limp quite a bit still from it, but I try to hide it.
Yeah, wow, goodness me. Yeah, that's one of those things that, you can't imagine how you'd react until you're in the middle of it. And I guess did you have time to react? Or was it just, oh, wow, this is happening? And
no, I saw it. I I didn't process it. I saw the rotor still in the air because I was sweeping over to look at the pilot. And I was really intending on looking at the airspeed indicator because I knew what we had to have in airspeed in order to auto rotate. And that sweep to my left, I see the rotor. And then I look at the airspeed indicator, and we're traveling. This is no auto rotation. But then after that, everything is blank to me until just after the impact. And I was thrown out of the aircraft, and the aircraft actually ended up, the main rotor was about 3 feet away from my head. But so I'm amnesic to the actual crash.
Right.
But after that, I remember everything that happened and how the rescues occurred and who came to help. And,
wow.
It's just, you don't believe it. I couldn't process it for several days, actually.
Wow, I'm not surprised. Wow. But you made it out in like one piece, relatively, and went on to do quite well. Someone just said, Dave Chambers said, "Is there anything Paul hasn't been through?"
Well, oh yeah, lots of things actually. I got a long list of things yet to do.
Yeah. Again, I just want to run through some other events and people, and again, it was in 19. Was it? When was it? I can't remember when it was. Anyways, I think it was 78. Great photo of AJ Foyt, you and AJ. I think after his fourth
in 77. Yes,
77,
that was my
yeah.
first
Your first one.
Play-by-play call and his fourth win. And that picture is taken the next morning. And which is a tradition at the Speedway. They bring the winning car out the starting line, and then the driver stands there and gets the official photos and the photos that the sponsors need. And then if there's time, we who were also involved could run out and get a photograph. And so he's looking very dapper, and I've got on blue jeans. So, but I love that. I love that photograph. I love that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic photo, and AJ didn't seem to change for about 30 years. He just seemed to look the same from the photos that I've seen.
And not now.
No, he's different. Yeah. But I mean, obviously he's doing very well with the AJ Foyt racing team and everything. But just your thoughts on him and as a driver and as a person, and your recollections of him, because he's an absolute, he is Mr. Motorsport, isn't he? And over in the States.
Yeah, he's the key guy. I think the way I look at him is not just the first 4-time winner, but he won the race in both the Roadster and in a rear engine car.
Yeah, he's the only guy to do front and rear, isn't he?
That's correct. And that he made that transition was pretty phenomenal, because a lot of guys didn't, and a lot of the crews didn't. They didn't know how to bump steer a rear engine car, for example. And that was a learning curve of 4 or 5 years there. So that's why I think it was in many ways more significant, him having driven in those big, heavy front engine cars where the heat's pouring off the engine and you've got like a bus steering wheel. And now it was great for the fans because he was sitting right up and you could see him fighting the wheel. And so, yeah, he's amazing for that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I think back to all the guys way back through history and all kinds of motorsport, I mean, AJ's one that I would have loved to have seen drive in the flesh, whether it be front engine, rear engine, because he's just one of those guys. And his character as well, from what I can gather, he's just not a bombastic kind of guy. And
my way or the highway.
Yeah, doesn't take any nonsense, shall we say.
Most of us in the media, the ones that had any kind of profile that they could interview AJ, we'd still sneak over to the garage and stand at the door and not go into the garage. I usually go in every garage, no problem. But that one, all of us were, Mr. Foyt, can I speak to you? No. Okay.
On the back foot, rather than rushing in. Amazing. I mean, well, I think my biggest memory of AJ Foyt when he was racing, I think it was shortly after. I think he was still racing. I can't remember. No, I think he'd retired, and Ari Lyondike had won, and he had a go at whoever it was, and he went over and slapped him around the back of the head.
Now, there's a bit of a story there too. That was one of the earlier races for ESPN2.
Right.
And it was a tape delay. The race would end like at 11, and then it would play live. We re-recorded it live to tape, but it would play back like at 7 the next morning, something like that.
Right.
And we were just going off the air, and I'm reading the going off the air and getting ready to say goodbye. And it was a very wide shot of the track with even some credits in front of it, but I saw it happen, and I'm wondering, did that happen? And then a Root climbs on and he says, Foyt just slapped the daylights out of Ari. Excuse me. Of course, the deal there was Ari thought he won, and in fact he had.
Yes. It was the week after Indy, wasn't it? I think. Was it the week? I think it was the week after Indy, and
at Texas World. So
yeah.
Ari to this day will tell you that really rung his bell. That was a pretty good hit.
When I spoke to Ari about it back about 18 months ago, and he said, I mean, it sounded like a big hit, was it? And he goes, oh, yeah. I turned around to have a go at who it was, and I realised it was AJ, but I couldn't really tell because I was, my eyes were still wobbling. I think he'd have turned and run if he'd seen it was AJ anyway, perhaps. Yeah. Was it AJ? Was it 67 when he came through the carnage and on that last lap crash, wasn't it? And he came through and it was but where's AJ? And made it through and won the race. That's one of those.
When you're viewing some of those years up until 1986, if you're watching anything that came from ABC, those were all tape delayed and edited.
Right.
Not always. They showed a great deal more of intellect and understanding, which of course you can do when it's pre-taped because you can go back in and add things and delete things. And
sure.
So they knew what the finish was about, and that's exactly the way they called it in the booth. So that was, where is he? And that, there's a Tom Carnegie, but the mystery was there, and then he comes through the middle of these spinning cars and everything and takes the win.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show. I love the fact that it was the live, like the live audio as it was.
Right.
Fantastic. That's terrific. Again, just buzzing on. Photo of you with I saw a photo of you in 1977 with like Tony Holman. I mean, he was obviously the guy that saved the Speedway. Back in, was it post-war? Was it him? I think it was.
Yeah.
He bought it. And
Tony bought the Speedway during the war, right in 1945, right at the end, and held their first race like 6 months later.
Wow.
And then he vowed to do everything he could to make the Speedway better and better, which is what he did. He saw the Indy 500 as a party that he was throwing for the race fans in Indiana. And it got to be quite a party, didn't it?
It got quite big, didn't it? It was quite a big.
They're doing all right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it like keeps ticking over, No, and fantastic job that he did, saving it. Want to come on to 78? I think you called two of Al Unser Senior's.
79, yes, right.
Mm-hmm. One of them was the first one. It was a fantastic photo, and obviously very sad that he's recently passed away. I just want to sort of, obviously we'll come to Bobby shortly. Completely different kettle of fish. But obviously Al Unser Senior and Al Unser Junior, obviously, father and son, fantastic seeing them racing together later on. And I was just wondering your thoughts, memories of both Unsers, because obviously it's an incredible family, isn't it? It
was fun to watch Senior and Junior interact because a lot of people had talked to Al, and he was pretty brazen in those days. He was he's kind of a typical champion, and then he knew that he was the best there is, and nobody could tell him. Well, of course, he had a father that knew exactly what he was doing and could tell him. And I think that would, on occasion, make him quite uncomfortable. But then there is times, actually several times, where it's been rumored that He might have blocked on behalf of his father for a race win. But yeah, to see father-son and out in its open, like we're seeing it now with Colton Herta, as father Brian Herta is on the stand. And occasionally, if you're listening to that radio, you get a little sharp response.
You get, a little father-son type thing, yeah. And obviously, Al won it. He won the race 4 times, which is absolutely fantastic. And obviously, Al Jr. won it twice. 1992. We'll touch on it very shortly, but that was one heck of a finish, wasn't it? It's still the closest one ever, and it's still the one that I think everyone still turns to when they think of a finish to the 500. Certainly for my generation.
Yeah, it's that Scott Goodyear.
Yeah.
He
started last, didn't he? Was it Scott started last?
Yes, started last, and
wow,
he thought he was going to win it, and I thought he was going to win it.
Really?
He moved out of the draft from Al's car a little too late. If he'd moved 100 yards earlier, he may have won it. Gotten out into some clean air. But again, a Paul Page story to that is our booth at that time was situated on top of the main grandstand, but because of its weight, it had to be situated back from the edge of the roof of the grandstand. So we had to get right up against the glass in order to see the track down below. Well, we mostly relied on monitors, but I see what's going to happen. And so I want to see it. I want to look down on it because I don't count on what camera shot I'm going to get. And it was a good thing because the shot taken was from turn 1 looking at them.
Yes, right.
So and I realized that I start pushing monitors out of the way, and I actually stand up on my chair. So I'm right on the window, and I saw it, and I had no idea who won it.
Really?
I really didn't, and I'm trying to give me a shot or something. Then I looked down at the scoring monitor, and it showed the 2 places and the interval. There we go. It was on for a while. I don't know who won the 500.
Wow, yeah, that must have been amazing at the time to see because it's still the closest finish ever.
Well, perhaps, as you can tell, all of these things are pretty amazing from my point of view.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, this is amazing
wonderful
about all this. Yeah, absolutely amazing. While we're on the subject of 1992, I've mentioned, I'm ashamed to admit it, when I was 11, 11-year-old race fans like to see cars spinning, and but it goes wrong.
Well, that was the year if you wanted it.
Which I'm not proud of, but 1992 is the year that I remember. And it was
because it was cold. It was very cold.
I
think it was 42 degrees. I think in today's world, you wouldn't have started that race at that temperature. What now the tire engineers look for is a combination of track and ambient temperature, and it has to be higher than 100 degrees. And 46 degrees is pretty much where you don't want to go any lower than that. So here these folks were roaring out of the pits. They didn't have the benefit of any tire warmers. And so they get around the back stretch or even turn 1 and they'd lose it because the tires weren't grabbing.
Yeah. I remember watching it. We had it here, but we had to have like commercial breaks here. And literally every time we came back from a commercial break,
another yellow.
It was your voice. As we came back, it was your voice. It was like, car on the wall. It was like, about 6 or 7 times. Every time we came back from commercial, it was the car in the wall. But but it was obviously very, sad. Was that the that was the year we lost that Jovi Marcello in qualifying, and then like Nelson Piquet, smashed his legs up, and there's like Andretti smashed his legs up, and it was just one of those absolutely awful years, wasn't it, for accidents?
It was another one of those terrible years, but good came out of it in like Jeff Andretti's crash was horrendous. His feet sticking out in the front, and
awful.
So as a result of that year, they started really thinking about that form of safety and what they could do, and they moved the driver back and started strengthening the pieces to the end that we have the car we have today, which is incredibly safe.
Yeah, absolutely. When you can hit the wall and you always know they're going to be fine.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, around that era, yeah, we mentioned about Arie Luyendyk. I said he was one of my favourite racers and had him on.
Yeah.
1990, something that stuck in my mind when he was battling with like Bobby Rahal in the late stages of the race. And one of my favourite bits of commentary from you, it was in turn 3, I think it was, and Ari went into the lead. And you said, and Arie Luyendyk leads the Indianapolis 500, and you could hear the roar from the crowd behind what you were saying, and it's just one of those fantastic audio moments. And it's stuck in my mind that moment because I always wanted Ari to win anyway because he looked cool, long hair and all that.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic to see him win that year. One thing I want to just go back to very quickly. 1982, very quick. Kogan, Andretti, that start. What a nonsense that was.
Yeah, and I don't think to this day we actually know the truth of that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying it was just a very odd start. You know, you're getting ready to go to green, and all of a sudden Kogan's going.
Yeah, well, Kogan's in the front row, and just before the green, and in fact, I think the green had just come out. He spins and hits the wall and creates quite a mess with everything else. If you look at it carefully, you will see that Mario from the second row is already up in the front row. Yes. And that car, the minute it came off the wrecker, they threw a tarpaulin over it, and nobody was ever allowed to see it. The supposition by many at that point was that probably a half shaft broke. We had the single gate turbochargers at the time, and they have a bit of a lag, and it just made broken the right half shaft and spun him into the wall. I don't think we'll ever know what that was about, but we know what both AJ and Mario think about him.
They weren't happy, were they?
No, they were not happy. Not happy at all.
Should they be?
No.
I just remember AJ just raging on the case.
We used his expression, that Coogan kid, when his name was Kogan.
Kogan, yeah, he got his name wrong, yeah. No, terrific. Just want to touch on a few other bits and pieces. I mean, Willie T. Ribbs. We had Willie T. Ribbs on. Absolutely love the guy. Absolutely brilliant, larger than life. And also, you were commentating when he became the first African American to qualify. And also, at that particular time in history, it perhaps in the wider world may not have been the most welcome occurrence, but just because of the way the world was, but it seemed that everyone was just over the moon for him. Everyone was so happy that he'd qualified and came down the pitch with his arms up in the air, and it was a wonderful scene, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a huge moment, obviously.
Yeah.
But he is so likable and so fun. He did the series in the U.S., the All-Star Series that Tony Stewart has put together, and you get a sense of his real personality out of that one too. We have a Friday meeting for lunch every week in Indianapolis at a place in Speedway, and one day he just showed up. Now this happens a lot. A lot of drivers go through here and everything, and some older drivers like Vukovic and Koonsman are Johnny Parsons. They're all part of it on a regular basis. So there were 8 or 10 of us, and here came Willie. And boy, he was fun. He was telling stories, and I personally always liked the guy. He was really fun. In fact, he was involved in a terrible situation in Vancouver where he hit a corner worker. Wasn't his fault. Corner worker made it right, and killed him. And getting Willie through that, spent some time with him and sent a number of notes to him because that slowed him down, and he finally got his feet back under him. But as you can imagine, that would be here are these wonderful volunteers, and my God,
I mean, again, it was about a year or so ago that I spoke to him on one of these, and I cleared it beforehand. I said, "Look, are you okay to talk about that?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's fun." But you could tell even talking about it now, he still was a bit. His voice was wobbling. It was an awful act, and as you say, completely not his fault. It was just. One of those horrible things, but what a guy! What a great guy!
Super guy, fun.
Sadly, he's not going to be at the Indianapolis 500 this year. I did ask him if he was going to be there. He goes, "No, sadly not." But he's going to be in the UK soon, so
Oh, good.
I might go and grab a beer with him.
That'd be good. But you're going to
That's
be in
something I
Indy,
want to
so
do.
you can't.
No, that'd be great. Fast forward a bit. 1995, Jacques Villeneuve, the only man to do 202 laps in the Indy 500, won the Indy 505. That was amazing, wasn't it? I mean, to be penalised 2 laps and then still win the race.
Making those laps up, in part a strategy that did it, but the finish with Scott Goodyear going ahead as we're coming back to green, and Scott Goodyear accelerated a bit early. He was the leader and passed the pace car on the track. Villeneuve was in second and didn't do that. The race completes, but Goodyear is, I think it was in the last 10 laps of the race that happened. Goodyear, he and Steve Horn, who was the car owner at the time, talked on the radio, and Scott was in the lead, and the officials are saying, we're not going to score you. You've created a major violation there. And then finally, they did stop scoring him. So he actually crossed the finish line ahead of Jacques, but
he actually won it on the track, didn't he? He was the first car to.
Right. And that was their attitude. They could have been nice guys and come in and be all proper and everything, but they decided, no, we're going to prove. It was a big moment for the Honda engine as well. So we're going to prove, we can do this. Yeah. And Scott's one of my best friends. We worked a lot on television together, and he's got several times that he has been second and not won. I think he will tell you it's something like, I didn't win 3 races by a total of like 1 2/10 of a second. His finishes were so close, and then of course that one. But he's a super guy, fun guy.
They said that he passed the pace car, didn't he? But they said the lights had gone off and the yellows weren't flying, but he still passed it before it got into the pits. But
that's correct. So there was a lot of controversy that the pace car slowed down, but that was later proven not to be true.
Yeah.
I think the truth is Scott didn't know that rule. I think that wasn't prevalent in kart at the time.
Yes.
So he saw the pace car pulling off and figured it was time to go.
Yeah, well, because that was in the midst of the kart IRL.
Right. Those wonderful years.
Yeah, real mess. But no, he's a guy I'd love to speak to, Scott, just for that reason. But just moving swiftly on, because I'm just wary of the time. I've got a lot to get through. There's a great photo of you and Danny Sullivan in suits and shorts in Rio. That was a great photo. I love that one. Suits for the top half and shorts on the...
Well, it was 108 degrees. And we weren't about to wear, our jeans or our full leg trousers.
Sure.
And so we were both in shorts, but we have our tie and our jacket on and everything. And we're doing it, and I suddenly see the elements in the lens of the camera start to move. And I know what's happening. They're pulling to a wide shot, and they finally, we weren't embarrassed. We thought it was a lot of fun, but we also didn't expect the director to do that.
So you weren't warned, it just happened.
Yep.
Fantastic. I can imagine Danny taking that in his stride again. We've spoken to him, and he's just like, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Take it in his stride. He's a great guy. I saw a photo that you got quite close to Helio Castroneves for reasons off track, which I'm not going to go. There was a few things with Helio. And there's a great photo of you and him after I think it was his third win. And you can see you're hugging him, and he's got tears in his eyes, and it's just a really lovely photo. And obviously he went out and won it for a 4th time last year. Showed the kids up.
That's right. He's there's another spectacular driver, and again, everybody's friend to an extreme. And there is a photo. There's not a photo. I wish there were. When he came down from the podium with his wreath and everything still about him, I was standing on the ground down below that. And as soon as he saw me, he came running for me, and we got a big hug there too. We like each other. And his winning that I said that 1960 was my favorite race until last year. I thought that finish was phenomenal.
Oh, it was fantastic. And even though it wasn't full capacity, the noise from the crowd and everything, it felt like it was just a full capacity crowd. And I remember saying, I was watching it with one of my colleagues, and I said, "Is he going to go up the fence? He's got to go up the fence."
No, of course.
Many
He not
did. It
only
was
went
like,
up
yes!
the fence, he probably ran a half mile back and forth on the track.
He was up at, yeah, oh, it was just fantastic to see. And the thing is, I mentioned that obviously we're going to be there in 4 weeks' time, and we were supposed to go last year, and we were saying to each other, I hope it's someone that, not that we don't like, but someone who we're a bit indifferent to that wins it, because we don't want to miss a big one. And then Helio went and won it. It was like, oh no, like we should have been there to see it. But
You know,
no.
one of the interesting things to me about Indianapolis, the 500, is that it's never, ever been the same way. Indy, you know, first of all, we're traveling essentially 300 miles further than any other race in the season. So there's a lot of unknowns out there. And there's also history to prove that, where am I trying to go with this? There's history about who's leading on the 190th lap more often than not will not win the race.
Right.
So there's that fun in that as well. But to watch him win the race and follow right behind him, I mean, it could have been anybody. But they were also running into traffic, which I'm like, oh my goodness, what's this going to show? But
well, when they came up on traffic, I think everyone took a deep breath in when they came up on traffic. It was like, oh, yeah, how's this going to go? But what a finish! It was fantastic.
It was good.
And obviously you had like Takuma Sato won it the year before, showing that the older guys, they can still do it. They still got it. And I had a chat with Will Power end of last year, and I've got it recorded on here. He said that if he wins, me and my colleagues can go to the drivers' party. So I'm going to have to make sure that I get in touch with him if he wins.
Those parties can become a little raucous too, but they're fun.
Right, we'll see if we make it, and and we'll report back. Again, I just want to touch on 2011, Dan Weldon, J.I. Hildebrand. I've never seen a finish like it. It was, obviously, I've spoken to JR on here, and he's very candid about it. He's like, look, as soon as I came up on I forget who it was, the guy that was slowing, he says, I knew that I wasn't going to get round, and I was just hoping I was far enough ahead once I hit the wall, which he wasn't. But it's just still one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen in motorsport.
Yeah, the situation, of course, is that JR is leading the race, and he's been doing very well. And by the way, I think he's a driver that has been terribly underrated. He really deserves a good ride.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he makes a mistake on that last corner, and he hits the wall. And now he's sliding along the wall. And in the broadcast booth, because I'm working with the radio, the question now becomes, well, if he crosses the line sliding, this is just going through our heads quickly, is he a winner? And then we see Weldon come out of nowhere and just nips him. Surprised for Weldon. I think a surprise for everybody.
Absolutely.
And definitely a surprise for Mark Janes, who was, I forget which announcer it was, but Mike King. Mike King was the announcer doing play-by-play, and I'm standing next to him. And he calls, Hillebrand and Hillebrand and Hillebrand this, and then all of a sudden he turns to me and he says, Paul, who won it? So, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just someone shouting in the back, going, Weldon, 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 and his head, And obviously, as a Brit, I was like, yes, because you want the Brit to win. But then you immediately feel sorry for JR. And having spoken to him, he was like, oh, there's no need, it happens. He just sort of shrugs it off. It's just part of racing. And obviously, we all know
that would have been a terrific finish either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all know what happened to Dan later that year, which was incredibly sad. Really, really awful. But yeah, we're still very proud of him. Yeah, excellent guy. Again, I've got so many things we could talk about here. Something that I did see, you shared the booth in 2015. Was it with Robbie Buell? I always thought he was incredibly underrated as a driver.
Yes, Yes, he
Every
was.
time I saw Robbie, he never seems to get mentioned. Him and Buddy Lazier are the two that don't seem to get mentioned, and they're
Yeah,
very, very fine racers.
I really liked Robbie a lot, and actually, it was a last-minute decision. Whomever the radio network had scheduled to be in the booth as the analyst, in radio for a long time, we called the person the driver expert. And then whoever it was couldn't make it, and I went out looking for Robbie because I knew that he spoke very well, and that he understood not only the technology but the strategy, and I thought he would be good, and he was great.
Yeah. No, I remember when he was in the booth, and I thought, oh, there's a name I've not heard for a while, and yeah, he was a great broadcaster. I remember
Absolutely,
thinking,
and a good driver, great driver.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of broadcasting, I can't let this go without talking about Bobby Hanza. I always remember that you, Bobby. I used to do an impersonation of Bobby Hanza, which I'm not going to do, but it was fantastic. But it was you and Bobby Hanza, and also like Jack Arute and Sam Posey and Jerry Punch, and it was just a fantastic broadcast team.
That was
And
fun.
they're the voices of my childhood watching the Indy 500, and I still watch them back, and it still wouldn't be the same if anyone else called it. Someone did ask me on Twitter, could I ask you about having breakfast on the morning of the race with Bobby, and just in the TV compound there? He just said it was something that you guys used to do. I don't know how true that
Yeah,
is.
we would come out in a police escort very early in the morning, so we'd kind of get situated and settle down, and we'd have a production meeting, and then it was breakfast at the compound. But Bobby, I think the fun one with both Bobby and our staff was, I had a friend who was a security guard for the America's Cup. He
Right.
had the cup, he traveled the cup. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
one of our producers was totally in love with the America's Cup. And we actually went to the yacht club in New York, and he made a big show out of it. On this pedestal is where the America's Cup stood for so many years. Of course, we don't have it now. So I called the guy. I said, can you bring that out to Speedway? He said, sure. So then I called the Borg Warner people and said, can you get the Borg Warner trophy out there? Sure. So there were the two of them sitting side by side in the center of the table, and people are walking in like, how do you pull that off?
Wow.
Bobby was he was a treat. He's one of the people you could truly say they broke the mold.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Most intellectually honest person I think I've ever met, though.
Yeah.
In that if he didn't understand something, he would badger you until he actually did.
Right.
But we had so many fun moments together. There are so many stories there. It's hard to decide which is the best story at any given time. But one of my favorites is when Bobby first started. He for our live on camera at the start of the show, he would tape together some file folders and write what he wanted to say on those. It was a cheap teleprompter, and I kept talking to him and said, you're going to get caught. One of these days, something's going to change, and what you're about to say is no longer germane. So you need to do it ad lib. You need to memorize what you want to say, and then you can pivot away from it if it becomes necessary. And he didn't do it. So we were at Michigan doing the Michigan 500 one year, and we were up on the top of the roof of the grandstand, which is very, very high in the air there. And Bobby had his files and all that, and it's about 3 minutes before we go on. So I worked this out with the stage manager, and I all of a sudden I say, Bobby, come on, we're on, which he never knew when we were coming on or not. He was always off doing something. We get together, we get the microphones up there, and I do my little opening bit, and I turn it over to Bobby, and Bobby starts reading those cards. Excuse me. And then the stage manager did what I asked him to do. He dropped the cards. And it just Bobby. And that's why I said, you see? Now, we weren't live, thank goodness, but you don't bring those out again. I did the same thing with Sam Posey once. He used to make little 5x7 cards of everything he thought of for the to be spoken about in the 500. And he set him in front of himself to the point that he kind of got distracted from the race because he's always looking through the cards for something.
Just flipping through it.
So, yeah, one year I just walked over just before the start. I picked him up and I threw him down the other end of the booth. I thought he was going to have a heart attack, but he was much better that year. You're all practical jokers.
No, that's fantastic. I love that, the behind the scenes stuff. And people, of a certain age don't, they forget he was a very, very good driver as well. He won the
3-time winner.
3-time winner, and between him and the 2 hours, what was it? 4? So it was 8 times they've won it, haven't they? 9 times. 9 times. Just an amazing family, and I just love his voice. His voice was so unique, and it was just, when. Yeah, but I love the fact that we
all take joy in trying to mimic him, Well, son, I just don't know if the race is going to go that way. That was, I don't know. Well, Gary Gerald, one of the pit reporters, was dead on. He would do Bobby Unser, because he was funny.
Yeah, see, I used to do one to my mates, but some people watching, I'm not going to do it. But no, and. I think you must. Are there any tales of Bobby or Mario or Emerson Fittipaldi? Are there any that you can tell us that are broadcastable, or are they best kept for off air?
Let's see, Mario, Bobby. Bobby. We were in Phoenix one day, actually in Scottsdale, and there's a mountain right in the middle of that. It's really a big hill, but. It's called the Camelback Mountain, and up on it are people with a lot of money and beautiful homes. And we're driving. I'm driving the rental car, by the way, because Bobby was banned from driving rental cars for the longest time.
Okay.
And Bobby says, "Look at that house up there. That's beautiful." Yeah, it's nice. Thanks, Bobby. Let's go up and look at it. Well, Bobby, it's pretty secure area. And I'll turn right here. So I turn. There's no gate. So we wind our way up. We finally get to this house, and Bobby says, "Pull in the driveway." It had a circular driveway in front of the house. Bobby, we're going to get arrested now. This is not the kind of thing you do in this area. No, it'll be fine. So I get up the front door, and he says, "Stop here a second." I stop. He jumps out of the car and knocks on the door. And the lady of the house opens the door and says, "Yes." And Bobby says, "Hi, I'm Bobby Unser, the fastest man alive and winner of the 500 3 times. Could I look at your house?" The woman said, "Sure, come on in, Bobby." But that was something that Bobby could do that no one else could.
Just get away with that kind of thing. Wow, I love that. That's fantastic. That's terrific. And very sadly,
there are probably 100 of Bobby Unser stories that I could tell you. He was so much fun.
I'm sure there are. Really sure he was. Just going to wind down. Things happened fairly recently. Are you inducted into the IMS Hall of Fame, which was amazing, on the same day as Michael Schumacher? That's a cool.
Well, I have the ring, but I haven't yet been inducted. I was been inducted 2 years ago.
Oh, I see.
So this year we will finally be able to have that banquet, and it'll be Janet Guthrie and I, and Michael Schumacher from my year, which I thought, boy, you want a yin and a yang. There's Schumacher, and then there's Paul down here somewhere, and Dale Earnhardt will be up there as well. So and Wally Dolenbach. So rather than just 2 inductees, we'll take care of 3 years of inductees, and that's the Thursday before the race.
Okay. Is Danny Sullivan there as well? Because I contacted Danny about catching up at the Speedway, and he said he was being inducted that evening as well. I think he said, unless he was telling me that. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's another Hall of Fame. There's a Motorsports Hall of Fame, which maybe I think maybe that's it.
Yeah, could well be. Yeah, that was the one that Hanza hosted recently. Yeah, but it must be a very proud moment for you, being inducted in and like being voted in.
Well, when you look at the list of inductees, there's another award called the Jimmy Angelopoulos Award. He was one of the great writers for the Speedway, and that was the person who showed the best sportsmanship.
Right.
And so that trophy's got a lot of super names on it, and for some reason I was put on it at one time.
Wow, it's fantastic. Yeah, just to get a bit of recognition. I mean, obviously, it's not something that I assume you would ask for. It's just, but if it's offered to you, it's nice to have, isn't it? It must be lovely. It must be a nice feeling.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Just some fun little things that I picked up from your career, just to wind down. Again, looking at the time, it's tickling right on. Is it true you had a phone call from the International Space Station?
Yes, I did.
It doesn't get any cooler than that, does it? That's amazing.
Well, I got to be, first of all, good friends with the people that were in the aircraft carrier Navy. And then as a result of that, I got, one year we were racing in Houston, and we made friends with a lot of people. One of them, Dave Brown, astronauts and controllers. And Dave Brown, who unfortunately passed away on that terrible reentry where the thing disintegrated.
Yes.
But he wanted on his flight to document the flight very carefully and completely in a different way. So he bought a bunch of GoPro cameras, and he'd come and ask, well, if I put it here, put it there. We went out and looked at the shuttle simulator and did that. And so I got a good relationship going with them as well. And one of the guys that I developed a pretty good relationship, named Ed Lou, he was, and I think he still is, the only guy to, no, he's not anymore, but he had a number of EVAs, outside the spacecraft. And so we're good friends. He had my number. He gets launched. He's up at the space station, and I'm walking across the parking lot at Texas Motor Speedway, and the phone rings, and hello. And he started, hey, Paul, how you doing? I said, who's this? He said, Ed Lou. No. Ed Lou is up in the space station right now. Don't pull that on. No, it is Ed. And then
who is this really? Yeah.
Things that I should know. And I, wow, from the space station? That's cool.
That's fantastic. And there's a photo, isn't he, that he took from the Speedway?
Yeah.
And he signed it to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of my very good friends, Phil Engelhard, who was the senior flight director for NASA for a number of years, handled a number of emergencies. He's coming to the 500s. First time he's been there in about 20 years. So I'm looking forward to him too.
He'll be there this year.
Yeah, they're such good people.
Well, that'd be lovely. On a complete flip side, I love this. The hot dog eating contest that you did the commentary on. Nathan's hot dog.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. That would be beneath me, wouldn't it?
I've seen a picture. It's something absolutely brilliant. 500 to hot dog eating. It just
well, other than auto racing, I've done a lot of other sports for network television. Some of them very legitimate, and some of them crazy. Like one year, we did the Arcata to Ferndale kinetic sculpture race. There are two cities in Northern California, and Northern California is where I think the whole idea of the marijuana being legal started.
Right.
And it was a very strange event, and thank goodness it never made the air. I've done the world's Rubik Cube Championship from Budapest at the Opera Hall. And so one day I get a call, hey, do you want to do an eating contest? I said, oh, sure. Well, it's 4th of July, and they gave me the whole bit. I loved it. In fact, the first time I did it, they got on the, when they're going to introduce me, they say, gentlemen, start your enzymes. But it was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of it tongue in cheek, but it's always on the 4th of July. I think I did 14 of them. That was fun to do.
Oh, brilliant. I absolutely love that. I love it. Again, just going to wind down a few fun questions. I mean, this is, again, probably some impossible questions perhaps, but I'm going to ask them anyway.
All right.
What's your favorite motorsport memory? I mean, you obviously you have thousands, but have you got anything that really sticks out as being, wow, that was something else?
Well, certainly the AJ Foyt fourth win. because that's also my first time in the booth, and
Yeah.
that was a very good race. He and AJ and Gordon Johncock were fighting neck and neck until Gordon Johncock's engine let go. It was a crankshaft issue, and actually last year I just loved last year's Indy 500. And like I say, the noise you got, I think we were allowed 160,000 last year. And this year you'll see full 300,000 in that place, which it always does. And to hear 300,000 people cheer is pretty amazing. When Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears were going at it, 82, the last lap, they were neck and neck crossing the line at the white flag. So on the last lap, I could tell in the booth, of course, the turn announcers are calling the race and I'm to call the finish. I knew where the cars were because the stereophonic, quadraphonic effect of the crowd, because they cheer as the two go by. And I
hit them round.
They're down in turn one. Oh, now they're in two. It was,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive.
Wow, that's very cool. Something that's just popped into my mind. I wanted to speak to you. I think was it the year Bobby Unser got his third win with Mario and all the controversy with passing the lap cars and all that, passing under yellow and passing in the pits and stuff. What was your thought on that? Because I spoke to Mario and he said, I should have. It still bugs him today that
it should
have won it.
Mario still has the ring from that race. Bobby does not have a ring.
I see.
And well, that leads into my absolute belief, and I guess this leads to the Formula One finish in the last race last year. You cannot make a change in the order after the race is complete. The fans have paid to see this happen. Now, if you make a mistake, that's your problem. But, so the complaint for Bobby was that he had passed cars under the yellow. And again, that was a time when we didn't have speed limits in the pits. Well, he had, but Mario had done it as well.
So, I think, was it 8 and 4 or 8 and 6 they passed, didn't they? Something like that.
It should have been left alone. If you call that guy at the finish and it's obvious, unlike Scott Goodyear, if it's obvious that that's the winner, you don't bring in an obscure rule later and say wrong. And I believe, like many people believe, I wasn't with ABC at the time, but the ABC made that an issue. Apparently, Stewart, Tom Benford, he didn't even know about it until ABC came for an interview. So then the overnight audit, they caught it. But it was, for me, I'm driving out to the track to get the next day picture, and there on the sign says, "Congratulations, Mario Andretti," and I'm like, what's this about?
Are you sure? That was the same as last year with the F1, as you touched on. That was just a complete shambles. But obviously, as a Brit, I guess it would be nice to see Lewis win it, but it didn't matter either way to me. But it was just the manner of it. But people saying you got to avoid the last lap and stuff. What nonsense! You can't do that. As you say, mistakes happen. I'm just going to make a statement here, and I want to get your response to it. The best thing I've ever seen on track, on footage at IMS, was Danny Sullivan spinning and then going on to win. That was cool. I mean, that was just sheer blind luck, he said it himself, but it's just an amazing thing. He spun, kept it out the wall and won.
Well, more amazing when you consider that was in the short shoot, and they're probably going 120 miles an hour when he spun.
Yeah, and he had no idea, and all of a sudden the turn 2 sweets were there, and it was like, oh, okay, right, go.
Pointed right, let's go.
Yeah, that's the best thing I've ever seen at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I mean, what was the best thing you've seen on track? I mean, again, perhaps an impossible question.
Well, that obviously was significant. The best, it is a very tough question.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think Dan Weldon getting his win in that, on the last 300 feet of the racetrack.
Yeah, that's my second choice. That
would be it for me.
Yeah, that's something else, isn't it? Just very quick thoughts on IndyCar today, and obviously they've got a lot of changes to the aero package and the aero screen and things like that. Just wondering what you think of it. I think the aero screen's a great thing. It's been proved 3 or 4 times. that it saved drivers. I think Ryan Hunter-Ray at Barber last year, and who was it? Was it Callum Islet this year? A bit of debris hit the screen very recently.
Yes, yeah.
Just wondering your thoughts on the cars these days and
Well,
the series today.
I kind of have mixed thoughts. They're incredibly safe now,
Yes,
which is terrific, because I've called way too many fatalities in my time.
of course. Yeah.
But I guess I'm getting more and more accustomed to them. Yeah, they're a little jet fighter now. Is kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah.
If I had my way, they'd be back sitting up with a big wheel where you could see the driver.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Sure.
I don't have my way.
No. I mean, just for my 2 pence, for what it's worth, obviously got the Halo in F1 and single seaters over here and the aero screen. I'm a bit of a purist. I'd rather see neither. Obviously, I don't want to see people getting hurt, but open cockpit should be open cockpit in my book. But I think I prefer the look of the aero screen, just for aesthetics, really. I think the Halo, it looks like, when you've got flip flops at the front and you have to put your toe either side of the so
Right.
it looks like one of those. It looks like sandals, and it just doesn't look right, whereas the aero screen at least looks cool. But
That's an interesting description, and it's apt. I don't like the Halo because it doesn't account for debris, small
Yeah.
bits of debris coming through.
well, if you think back to Felipe Massa when he had the thing hit
Right.
him on the head,
Exactly.
the Halo wouldn't have helped.
Whereas the aero screen, that's exactly why it's designed in the way it is, and
Yeah.
I think it's cool in that that's added another member to the pit team, which is the guy that has to pull the facing like we used to on the helmets.
Yeah, the tear off strip. Yeah.
Front windshield, so a guy has to lean over and pull that off during pit stop. So that's,
Just add something else, doesn't it? Yeah, but no, that's good. I think, similar train of thought there. And one final, again, impossible question.
good. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the final one. Yeah, who's the greatest driver you've ever seen race? If you had to put
Mario.
someone up,
Mario.
not
just
so
because-
impossible. Love it.
Because of his record alone, that he's unique in that nobody else has won the world championship, Daytona, and then Indianapolis 500. Plus, he understands the nature of being a champion, that he needs to be inspiring and he needs to be a leader and needs to promote his sport. And he's never been a big self-promoter. He's always promoted the sport, and so that he's my favorite for that reason. Yeah, Bobby Unser is way down the list.
He's up there right now. He's just shaking his
Yeah,
face.
well, actually, we have a thunderstorm coming through here, and it's
Oh,
thundering. I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm
I-
thinking maybe that's Bobby going after me.
He's just heard it, yeah. No, and obviously Mario's very humble, and he was lovely when he spoke with us here, so fantastic. Just as a quick sign off before I say my thank yous, Alonso Jr., it's in your book. He once said, "You haven't won the Indy 500 until Paul Page says you did." I think that sums up how you're, the esteem that you're held in around the Indy 500, and it's absolutely true. I would agree with that. It's in my era, and something that you put in your own words actually on your Instagram. It was a picture of your ring that you have, and it just said 1,000 memories, 40 Indy races, 2 Emmys, 1 Hall of Fame ring. What a ride! That pretty much sums it up. I mean, an incredible career, absolutely amazing. Thank you
I have never worked in my life. Maybe early on when I was a disc jockey, but
Yeah,
it has been the most terrific ride ever, and I've loved everything that I've been honored in doing.
as I said, it's just from watching from over this little island over the Atlantic. It's been amazing hearing, seeing all the broadcasts, the photos, and just talking to you now. It's been a real joy, and I'm very, very grateful for you sparing your time. It's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. I really do appreciate it.
It was fun. Thank you.
No, fantastic, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you very, very much. and we'll be back with another one soon. But a final thanks to you, Paul. Thank you very, very much. It's been a real joy speaking with you. Thank you. Okay. Good night, guys.